Canada's homeowner housing starts just hit a 30-year low, and I'm not talking about some minor dip that economists debate. I'm talking about the lowest level of single-family home construction since 1995. I'm talking about Toronto on pace for its worst annual housing starts in 3 decades. I'm talking about an entire generation being locked out of home ownership permanently. This is happening right now, December 2025. And it's not just one city. Toronto's condo starts dropped 60%. Vancouver's housing construction is in decline. The entire housing system that Canadians have relied on for generations is collapsing. And most people have no idea how bad this is about to get. I'm going to break down exactly what's happening here. The numbers, the reasons, the consequences. Because this isn't just about construction statistics. This is about your kids never owning a home. This is about an entire economy built on housing going into freefall. This is about Canada fundamentally changing from a nation of homeowners to a nation of permanent renters. But first, if you want to understand what's actually happening in Canada's housing market without the government spin or real estate industry propaganda, make sure you're subscribed to our channel Canada 24 Hub. Hit that subscribe button right now. Check if you're actually subscribed. Your subscription helps us keep doing this kind of investigative reporting. All right, let's get into what just happened. Homeowner housing starts in 2025 show an average annualized rate at its lowest since 1995. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation data released this week shows only 41,384 homeowner housing starts, housing built to sell directly to home buyers, recorded from January through October in cities or towns over 10,000 population. If the average monthly rate continues, there will be 51,545 new units started in 2025. That's nearly half the starts of 2002's high of 102,038. Nearly half. This is a continued downward trajectory over 2 decades. But here's what makes this even worse. Rental unit starts hit an annual record high of 87,971 within the first 10 months of 2025. If that rate continues, we're looking at 105,565 new rental units for all of 2025. Let me be really clear about what this means. Rental starts are now doubling the rate of homeowner housing starts. Developers have completely abandoned building homes for Canadians to own. They're building rentals, apartments, units where you pay forever and never build equity. Mike Moffat, founding director of the Missing Middle Initiative, explained it simply. Over the last few years, purpose-built rental has become a lot more profitable than building high-rise condos. And then on top of that, it's just gotten difficult for a lot of places to build what I call ground-oriented housing. Single detached townhomes and things like that because of high taxes, development charges, land use policies. Translation: the government made it so expensive and difficult to build houses that developers just stopped trying. Now let's talk about Toronto specifically, because Toronto is on pace for its lowest annual housing starts total in 30 years. Not just low, the lowest in 3 decades. On a per capita basis, Toronto's home building activity fell to its lowest point since 1996, driven mainly by a 60% drop in condominium starts. 60%. That's not a slowdown, that's a collapse. A pullback in investor demand during the first half of 2025 reduced project feasibility, leading to cancellations, delays, and a sharp drop in construction. Many in the building community suggest construction costs and development charges must be reduced to ease condominium prices and improve project viability. But here's the number that should terrify you. Toronto pre-construction condo sales dropped 90% in August 2025 versus the 10-year average. 90%. Sales haven't just slowed, they've essentially evaporated. Urbanation reported unsold inventory across all stages of development struck a record high in the GTA in Q2 2025, with 24,045 units available on the market. At the same time, sales continued to break 30-year lows with a 69% year-over-year decline. Just 3 projects totaling 891 units launched pre-sales in Q2. Meanwhile, 4 condo projects totaling 719 units were canceled. That brings the total since the start of 2024 to 21 projects and 4,412 units canceled. Canceled, not delayed. Canceled. Developers are walking away from projects entirely because the math doesn't work anymore. Here's what Mike Moffat said about why this is happening. The challenge is that prices are so low now that they don't cover the cost of construction, which is one of the reasons why sales have basically evaporated, because the builders and developers have gotten to a point where they just can't produce product and make it profitable and get financing. Think about that. Home prices are still unaffordable for most Canadians, but they're not high enough to cover construction costs. That's the paradox we're living in. Homes are simultaneously too expensive for buyers and not expensive enough for builders. The average home price in Canada dropped to $679,900 last month, a 20.2% dip from the March 2022 peak. But construction costs haven't dropped. Development fees haven't dropped. Land prices in many areas haven't dropped enough. So developers are stuck. They can't sell units at prices that cover costs. They can't get financing without pre-selling 70% of units. And buyers aren't buying because they can't afford it and they're worried about values dropping further. It's a death spiral. Now let's talk about Vancouver, because Vancouver recorded a 59% decrease in housing starts in March 2025 compared to March 2024. Weak pre-construction sales led to the cancellation and pausing of projects that failed to meet the necessary 70% threshold for financing. Same problem as Toronto. Can't get financing without pre-sales. Can't get pre-sales because buyers can't afford or won't commit. Projects die. But here's what's really concerning. CMHC says development charges are a major barrier, estimating 100,000 approved homes in the region are currently stalled due to related difficulties. 100,000 approved homes, ready to go, but stalled because of government fees and charges. That's not a market problem, that's a policy failure. New provincial regulations effective January 1, 2026 will allow home builders to defer up to 75% of development charges until occupancy. That's supposed to help, but it's too little, too late for projects that already died this year. Now let's talk about Montreal. Housing starts increased in the first half of 2025, supported by robust rental apartment construction. But growth was tempered by a slowdown in the condominium market, with units under construction at the lowest level in 15 years. Why? Newly built condo units are too expensive for many buyers, causing developers to move away from this housing type. Same story, different city. Here's the pattern. Across Canada's major cities, developers are abandoning homeownership construction and pivoting to rentals, but only because government programs are subsidizing it. CMHC surveys show nearly 88% of new rental projects in 2024 required support from CMHC financing programs. Government aid has been propping up rental construction. Without it, rental construction would collapse too. And here's the warning. CMHC's surveys show developer sentiment in the rental sector weakened in 2025 as rising financing costs and import tariffs on materials squeezed profitability. If interest rates remain high and market rents soften, planned rental projects could be delayed or canceled. That's the nightmare scenario. Homeownership construction already collapsed. Rental construction could be next. Now let's talk about the job losses, because a report by the Residential Construction Council of Ontario estimates housing starts declines translated into 35,377 fewer person-years of employment in the first 9 months of 2025 compared to the same period in previous years. 35,000 jobs gone in 9 months in one region. The report estimates that residential construction industry in Toronto has lost about 10,109 jobs this year alone. Richard Lyle, president of Rescon, was explicit. We're deeply concerned about this because we've got companies that are laying off crews and project teams right now in huge numbers. Systemically, we made a big effort to attract people into careers in construction, and those jobs aren't going to be there. Think about what that means. Canada spent years trying to attract young people into skilled trades, telling them construction was the future, promising good careers, and now those jobs are disappearing. The workforce at Laborers International Union of North America Local 183, one of the biggest construction unions in Ontario, has already tracked a reduction in hours of employment over the last 6 to 8 months. These are real people losing real livelihoods. Electricians, plumbers, carpenters, crane operators, project managers, all laid off because projects aren't happening. Now let's talk about what happens next, because CMHC expects that new housing will not meet levels required to return affordability to pre-pandemic levels by 2035. Read that again. We're not building enough housing to restore affordability by 2035, 10 years from now. Affordability is getting worse, not better. And here's why. After record completions expected in 2025, completions are projected to fall dramatically. This represents the most severe construction decline since reliable records began. The current market collapse is creating the foundation for a severe housing shortage by 2026-2027. Projects that should be starting now won't. Units that should be completed in 2 or 3 years won't exist. CMHC Deputy Chief Economist Tanya Barraza Ochoa was clear. While the increase in rental construction in the first half of 2025 was encouraging, the ongoing construction slowdown in the homeownership market poses risks to future housing supply, workforce retention, and affordability. She continued. The Canadian Home Builders Housing Market Index for Q2 2025 reflects industry confidence and shows developers are frequently burdened by high development charges and time-consuming approval processes. Systemic changes to Canada's housing system are necessary to create an environment with more cost and time certainty to increase supply. Translation: the system is broken. Developers can't make projects work. And without systemic changes, not minor tweaks but fundamental reform, this isn't getting fixed. Now let's talk about the social consequences, because apartments now account for 81% of all new housing construction. Ground-oriented housing, the single-family homes and townhomes that families want, has basically stopped being built. The number of Canadians renting their residences has grown to over a third of all Canadians, and renters are getting older. The median age of Canadian renters has climbed to 32 years old, with an average age of 35. These aren't young people renting for a few years before buying. These are people in their 30s who should be homeowners but can't be. They're trapped. And here's the worst part. A record of nearly 40% of Canadians aged 20 to 34 still live with their parents. In Toronto, that number climbs to 47%. Think about that. Almost half of young adults in Toronto live with their parents, not because they want to, because they can't afford not to. Angus Reid found 40% of renters had given up on ever owning a home. Given up? Not delaying? Not postponing? Given up entirely? That's an entire generation accepting they'll never own property, never build equity, never have the financial security that homeownership provides. Now let's talk about why this is happening, because understanding the causes matters. First, high construction costs. Materials are expensive, labor is expensive, land is expensive. The baseline cost to build a unit has skyrocketed. Second, development charges. Cities are adding massive fees to every new unit to pay for infrastructure. These fees get passed to buyers, making units unaffordable. Third, time-consuming approval processes. Projects can take years to get approved. Every delay adds costs. Many projects die during approval. Fourth, interest rates. Higher borrowing costs mean developers need higher returns to justify projects. Many projects that would work at 3% interest rates don't work at 5%. Fifth, buyer uncertainty. With prices falling, many potential buyers are waiting. They think prices will drop further, so they don't commit to pre-construction purchases. Sixth, investor withdrawal. The easy money from 2015-2021, buying pre-construction and flipping on assignment, is gone. Investors got burned. They're not coming back. All these factors compound. Anyone alone might be manageable. Altogether, construction stops. Here's the bottom line. Canada's homeowner housing starts hit a 30-year low in 2025. Only 51,545 units expected for the year, half of 2002's peak. Rental starts doubled homeowner starts, hitting record highs at 105,565 units. Toronto experiencing worst housing starts in 30 years, with condo starts down 60%. Vancouver housing construction in decline, with 100,000 approved homes stalled. 35,377 construction jobs lost in Ontario alone. 40% of renters given up on homeownership. Nearly 40% of Canadians aged 20-34 live with parents. This isn't a temporary dip. This is a structural collapse. The system that produced homeownership for generations has failed. Developers can't make projects work. Buyers can't afford what's being built. Government fees and regulations make everything worse. And CMHC admits new housing won't meet levels needed to restore affordability by 2035. Translation: it's not getting better anytime soon. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we're going to be covering every development in Canada's housing crisis as it unfolds. We're going to analyze every CMHC report, every municipal policy change, every developer bankruptcy, every government program that fails to solve the problem. Because this is the kind of story that affects every single Canadian household. Whether you're trying to buy your first home, worried about your kid's future, or concerned about the economic impacts of a construction collapse. This matters to everyone. The housing dream is dying for an entire generation. Construction jobs are disappearing by the tens of thousands. Cities are failing to build the homes they need. and governments are failing to fix the systemic problems causing it all. This story is far from over, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. Stay tuned.